Chapter 3. The early years of life with Bradley were very different from what I was expecting at the time, ever since I saw how innocent he looked in the hospital the early morning he was born. It was vastly different from my life as a single child, and just about as terrible as I thought it would be when my mother was still pregnant with him. Maybe I was just too exhausted at the time to see past his innocent first impression. More likely, though, maybe I just hadn't realized how hard it was having a baby around. When I was first introduced to Bradley in the hospital room, I thought he would sleep for all hours of the day, and so much so that I would even forget he was around. While he did sleep a lot, he was also awake at the least convenient hours of the night. In fact, I was kept up late the first several nights after Mom first brought Bradley home. He would cry during the late hours, loud enough that I was surprised the house didn't tremble from it. In fact, how Dad managed to get any sleep at all during Bradley's nightly crying fits was beyond me. I thought for sure he would tire himself out from making so much racket at night that he would sleep all day. But even during the day, he would wake up and cry when he wanted something. When I was 9, I even asked for a pair of earplugs for Christmas just so I could actually get some sleep at night. Thankfully, he started to cry less when my parents were teaching him how to talk. While I wasn't entirely thrilled to have Bradley around, I was at least relieved when he was starting to learn how to talk, so he wouldn't always cry when he wanted something. But little did I realize that Bradley would find new ways to get on my nerves as he got older. When he learned how to walk, he would follow me everywhere. He would enter my room whenever I wasn't around and mess with my belongings even though I told him repeatedly to stay out. I would scold him for just about anything, but take one look into his innocent little eyes and swear that he understood me and was just irritating me on purpose, no matter how underdeveloped Mom claimed his mind was. She always told me that trying to criticize his behavior was pointless since he couldn't understand what I was saying, but I didn't buy that excuse for a second. I claimed he was smarter than we realized and just liked making me mad. Whenever I watched television, Bradley would sit right next to me and watch with me, even though I knew he wasn't really paying attention to the program. In fact, if I stayed in a single place long enough, Bradley would sit next to me until he fell asleep on my side, and Mom would have to pry him off me so she could put him in his room to nap. For the first year or so that he was around, I had the hardest time deciding if he was trying to drive me out of the house or just wanted my constant attention. I hated the idea of either of those motives, but I seemed to be the only one complaining. Mom absolutely adored taking care of Bradley, but Dad seemed indifferent. He would only really ever spend time with his new son if Mom wasn't around to take care of him at the moment, as she knew I certainly wanted no part in raising my brother, so she rarely ever asked me to do any favors for him. They say that a newborn child is most attached to its mother. If that's true, then I might as well have been Bradley's mother, rather than his older sibling. He loved Mom and Dad too, but if given the choice, Bradley would easily pick me to be around. Everyone who knew of his preference thought it was adorable, but he was far too affectionate for my tastes, always holding onto my arm or hand with his tightest possible grip. Mom never objected to it since she thought it was adorable that he wanted to spend so much time with his brother. In fact, Mom took another picture of Bradley and me sleeping together on the couch. My hand was wrapped around his waist, and Bradley had his right arm stretched over mine as he sucked his thumb. She hung the picture up in Bradley's room next to a picture of the two of us in the hospital room, taken the night he was born, when I held him for the first time and fell asleep in the chair. The only times I could manage to get away from my new little shadow were when I went to school or to spend time with friends. Mom didn't want Bradley playing with us outside since she was worried he would get hurt. It was fine by me, even though I did feel guilt climbing up my spine when I turned around to look back at the house and be greeted with his teary-eyed disposition at the reality of being invisibly restrained to the confinements of the porch. And whenever I came home, Bradley was always the first to greet me like the puppy Mom never let us have. Joey, Mike, and Nathan rarely ever came over to my house after Bradley was born. Sleepovers were impossible since if we weren't being rowdy enough to keep him up, he would cry enough to keep us up. And even when he was slightly older, Mom practically demanded that we incorporate Bradley into our activities, even though we knew he was too young to understand what was happening. Board games? Bradley would probably eat the game pieces. Video games? Bradley couldn't hold a controller, much less press the buttons cohesively. Hide and seek? I could show Bradley a place to hide, but he wouldn't stay there for long. Besides all that, Bradley had no understanding of personal space. If he wasn't sucking his thumb or holding something, he would be poking someone or touching something in the house that he wasn't supposed to, because he would unconsciously break it. I can vividly recall one incident that took place on my 10th birthday. Bradley wanted to sit in my lap as I was getting ready to blow out the candles on my birthday cake. As I closed my eyes to make a wish, I heard a loud splat. When I opened my eyes, Bradley had slapped his hands straight down into the cake and started moving them around, smearing the chocolate frosting. While he was sucking the frosting off one hand, he was still getting it all over his face with the other. I hadn't let Bradley near any more of my birthday cakes, or any of my food for that matter, until he grew out of his wandering hands phase. Needless to say, Bradley was nothing short of a handful as a toddler. His curiosity had broken more of my toys and possessions than a newborn puppy could hope to chew through, and it was infuriating watching him get away with so many deeds unpunished that I knew I would be grounded for had I committed them myself. Mom kept trying to convince herself that Bradley's destructiveness was just a phase that he would grow out of, but Dad believed that Bradley just had a mischievous nature. That he liked bending the rules instead of conforming to restrictions so easily. His young age was a get-out-of-jail-free card, after all. Since I had a small wild streak inside me, Dad believes Bradley picked up some of it from watching me all the time. The very idea practically gave Mom nightmares, but Dad always thought it made us exciting and fun to raise. He never took Bradley's destructiveness too seriously, since he thought Bradley was too young to do any serious damage in the house. I'm certain that Dad loved Bradley just as a father should love his child, but I suspect that he wasn't a fan of raising a baby. I think his plan was to spend time with Bradley when he got older, and let Mom handle him in the meantime. After all, I know for a fact that that was what they agreed on with me, even if they'd never admit it. Dad loved having a son, just not as much as when he needed to do every little thing for him. I can't say that I blamed my father, though. How Mom managed to put up with all the care Bradley needed those first few years was beyond me. My grandparents, my aunts, and my uncles all adored Bradley in a way I couldn't understand. While they did give me plenty of attention at the time of my birth, it was different from how they acted around Bradley. They would gaze at me and congratulate my parents on providing the first grandchild of the family. I suspect that it wasn't actually me they loved, just the idea of finally seeing a new child to continue the family line. With Bradley, everyone was fascinated by how cute he looked and all the typical baby things that adults fascinate over. At the time, I was far too ashamed to admit it, but I was pretty jealous of Bradley. I would sit by and watch my family go nuts over him every time he would say a word, take a step, or just smile. Even at home, Mom was usually so busy with Bradley that it became a burden just trying to get her attention for a moment. It was almost as if the nightmares I originally had about being replaced didn't seem so ridiculous anymore. Bradley annoyed me, destroyed my property, and stole my family's heart. As a kid, I couldn't fathom the idea of ever liking my new little brother, much less living several more years with him.